Welcome in, everyone. We are so glad you decided to join us today for another deep dive.
Yes, thank you for being here.
If you are the kind of person who is endlessly curious about human behavior,
Which you probably are if you're listening to this.
right, exactly. If you enjoy peeling back the layers of popular media to see the psychological scaffolding underneath, and you appreciate exploring complex ideas without drowning in academic jargon, you are definitely in the right place.
We have a really fascinating mission today.
We do. We are going to deconstruct the anatomy of a modern romance narrative, but we aren't just looking at the plot.
No, the plot is really just the vehicle.
Right. We are going to rigorously examine how classic literary tropes are utilized, how they're frequently inverted by savvy authors, and how they ultimately serve to explore incredibly profound human themes.
Specifically, we're looking at the enduring impact of trauma, the pervasive illusion of control, and the terrifying but transformative beauty of vulnerability.
That is exactly the right framework to bring to this material.
It is a really common cultural reflex to dismiss the romance genre, to treat it as mere lighthearted escapism.
Oh, totally. People just brush it off as beach reading.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But when you apply a critical lens to the architecture of these narratives, you quickly realize they're operating on multiple levels.
Right.
They are highly structured psychological sandboxes.
I love that phrase, psychological sandboxes.
Yeah, because they allow authors and readers to safely explore how humans navigate grief, how we construct defensive armor, and how we negotiate the terms of intimacy.
So today we are going to look past the witty banter and the idyllic settings to analyze the behavioral science operating beneath the surface.
And to give you, the listener, the exact parameters of today's deep dive, the source material we are pulling from is highly specific.
Yes, let me get the exact parameters out of the way for our records. As mandated, the book name is It Seemed Like a Good Idea, Book 1 of 3, Darling Springs, by Lauren Blakely, and must be noticed in the audio output.
We have thoroughly reviewed the text, extracted the underlying thematic currents, and compiled a comprehensive analysis to share with you.
So, to properly ground you in this analysis, let's first establish the core dynamic of our protagonists and the world they inhabit.
Let's start with Ripley. Our central figure is Ripley Addison. She is a fiercely independent, highly capable entrepreneur.
She runs a lavender farm, right?
Yes, a working lavender farm in the idyllic, tight-knit town of Darling Springs. Ripley is also the identical twin sister to Haven Addison.
And Haven is currently a rapidly rising star in the film industry.
Exactly. Positioned opposite Ripley is Banks Kendrick. Banks is a former Marine who has recently transitioned into the private sector.
Specifically working as a close protection officer.
Right. What the general public would colloquially call a bodyguard.
Yeah.
He's just launched a boutique security firm called Apex Solutions alongside his business partner.
And the narrative hook that initiates all the tension is a classic high-stakes scenario.
It really is.
What happens when the man who inexplicably vanished after an intense, undeniably electric encounter at a hotel bar
Ends up being the exact security professional assigned to protect you a mere month later.
It creates an immediate pressure cooker. Just
Yeah.
so much unresolved tension and forced proximity.
But before we get into the mechanics of how that tension plays out, I want to set an overarching theme for this discussion.
Let's hear it.
As we navigate through this deep dive, I want you, the listener, to keep a specific concept at the forefront of your mind.
Okay.
The utility of control. I want you to critically evaluate how you utilize control in your own life.
That's a great question to ask. What are the meticulously organized routines or the demanding professional obligations we rely on?
Exactly. Or the relentless caretaking roles that you subconsciously use to insulate yourself from emotional risk.
Wow, yeah.
The central argument of the text we're analyzing today is that the mechanisms we use to survive our trauma often become the very cages that prevent us from truly living.
The friction between maintaining control and surrendering to vulnerability is the true engine of this narrative.
It is.
That is a phenomenal lens to look through. Let's look at how that friction is introduced right from the opening pages.
The bar scene.
Yes, we find ourselves in a sleek, dimly lit hotel bar in San Francisco. Ripley is sitting there, visibly overwhelmed by her responsibilities.
She has a lot on her plate.
She has just learned she has exactly 28 days to prepare her rustic working lavender farm to host a massive Hollywood film crew.
All because her twin sister landed a starring role in the movie Someone Else's Ring.
Right. So she's sitting alone, drinking rosé, literally crunching budget numbers on a cocktail napkin.
And this is when a highly aggressive, deeply cliché patron approaches her.
Oh, this guy. Someone wearing a striped business shirt and smelling of patchouli?
The worst combination.
Truly. And because Ripley is identical to her sister, this man genuinely believes she is the famous actress Haven, and he refuses to leave her alone.
From an analytical standpoint, this opening scene is a masterclass in establishing character through observation rather than exposition.
Because Banks is right there.
Yes, Banks is seated a few schools away, watching this unfold. The author could have easily written Banks as the stereotypical reactive muscle who storms over and physically intimidates the aggressor.
Right, the typical alpha male move.
But that isn't what happens. Banks conducts a silent, meticulous threat assessment. He observes that the aggressive patron has a distinct pale tan line on his left ring finger.
Deducing that the man removed his wedding band moments before approaching Ripley.
Exactly. He simultaneously scans the environment, noting that the bartender is currently occupied blending a massive order of margaritas.
So no institutional intervention is imminent. No bouncer is coming to save the day.
Right. He calculates the variables before making a move. When he does intervene, he simply slides into the empty seat next to Ripley,
And smoothly pretends to be her tardy boyfriend.
providing her with a seamless, non-violent exit strategy.
It is an incredibly sophisticated approach to the classic meet cute. But I do want to push back on something here.
Go ahead.
While Banks's observational skills are undeniably impressive, isn't there something inherently presumptuous about his intervention?
How do you mean?
Well, he assumes she needs rescuing. Doesn't that play into a rather antiquated patriarchal dynamic where the competent man has to save the distressed woman?
That is a highly valid critique.
Right.
And it is a tension the romance genre wrestles with constantly.
Right.
However, in this specific instance, the narrative mitigates that patriarchal undertone through Ripley's immediate reaction. She doesn't swoon or collapse into a posture of gratitude.
It definitely doesn't.
Once the aggressive man retreats, she immediately pivots to testing Banks. She matches his analytical energy.
She buys him a drink as a transactional thank you. But she deliberately changes her own order from rosé to whiskey sour.
Just to see how he reacts.
And she astutely deduces from his vibe that he was drinking bourbon. She turns the rescue into an intellectual sparring match.
The power dynamic instantly equalizes. They engage in a game of mutual observation, recognizing each other as highly capable, highly guarded individuals.
That mutual recognition is vital. And there is a specific physical detail the author includes during this bar scene that I found fascinating as a character clue.
The origami.
Yes. Before Banks intervened, Ripley noticed he was meticulously folding an origami butterfly out of a beverage napkin.
Which requires immense precision, patience, and a delicate touch.
It feels like a deliberate subversion of the brutish bodyguard archetype. Why do you think the author chose origami specifically to signal Banks's internal landscape?
The inclusion of the origami is a brilliant somatic marker. When we look at individuals who have operated in high-stress, high-threat environments...
Like a former Marine transitioning to close protection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We often see the need for grounding techniques to manage hyperarousal. Origami is a practice of creating order out of a blank slate.
It requires the practitioner to focus entirely on the present moment.
Executing precise geometric folds to achieve a controlled outcome. It tells the reader that Banks is a man who values structure, who possesses a quiet, artistic sensitivity.
And who actively manages his internal state through deliberate, controlled actions.
It juxtaposes his lethal capability with an undeniable gentleness.
That juxtaposition makes the chemistry between them practically combust. They have this electric banter, they recognize each other's intelligence, and they mutually agree to take this connection upstairs to Ripley's hotel suite.
But then reality hits.
Yes. When Ripley opens the door, the illusion of the sophisticated, mysterious woman shatters. Her room is a chaotic disaster zone.
It's covered in farm merchandise. T-shirts with bee puns on them, her laptop is opened, her agricultural ledgers are everywhere.
Banks politely excuses himself, ostensibly to secure a condom from the hotel fitness center vending machine.
And then he completely vanishes.
He ghosts her, leaving only a cryptic 3-line note with the front desk apologizing that something came up.
The ghosting incident is the catalyst for the entire narrative arc, and it requires a deep psychological unpacking. To understand why Banks left, we have to look at the severe compartmentalization of his identity.
Right, because he's in San Francisco for a specific reason.
Yes, to meet with an agency regarding a highly confidential, high-profile new client. He hasn't been given the client's name yet, only the demographic parameters.
So when he steps into Ripley's room and sees the farm merchandise, the laptop, and synthesizes that with her identical resemblance to a famous actress,
And her evasiveness at the bar?
his analytical mind misfires.
He incorrectly deduces that the woman he is about to become intimately involved with is, in fact, his new, highly confidential client, Haven Addison, operating under a pseudonym.
It is the classic Shakespearean trope of mistaken identity, but deployed in a modern high-stakes professional context.
Exactly.
But even if he thought she was his client, the way he handles it is brutal. He just leaves.
It is brutal.
I have to play devil's advocate here. Is his retreat truly about professional integrity, or is his professionalism just a highly convenient, socially acceptable excuse for a man who is terrified of actual intimacy?
You are hitting on the central contradiction of his character. It is both. Consciously, Banks believes he's making a purely ethical, professional calculation.
Because of his business partner, Dean.
Yes, he and Dean are trying to establish a pristine reputation for their new firm, Apex Solutions, after years of working under a reckless superior.
In the close protection industry, engaging in a romantic relationship with the principal, the client, is the cardinal sin.
It compromises your objectivity and endangers the client. Banks tells himself he is executing a necessary tactical retreat to preserve his business.
But subconsciously,
Subconsciously, you are absolutely right. His rigid adherence to professional boundaries serves as an impenetrable armor against emotional exposure.
by fleeing the scene and leaving a sterile note, he avoids the messy, unpredictable reality of a human conversation.
He prioritizes his illusion of control over her emotional well-being.
And the collateral damage to Ripley's emotional well-being is severe. Let's talk about the psychological impact of being ghosted.
It's devastating for her.
Ripley is left sitting in a chaotic hotel room, holding a 3-line note, trying to make sense of an abrupt abandonment.
And the text explicitly notes her history with men leaving her.
Specifically, an ex-boyfriend named Eric Patrick. He was a chef who romanced her in her small town and then abruptly relocated to New York because Darling Springs didn't fit his ambitions.
Right. So because Ripley doesn't know about Banks's professional dilemma, how does she process this rejection?
She processes it through the lens of internal attribution, which is a very common psychological response to unexplained rejection.
When humans are denied closure, our brains instinctively attempt to construct a coherent narrative to explain this sudden shift in reality.
Bizarrely, it is often less psychologically terrifying to blame ourselves than to accept that the rejection was random or based on external factors entirely beyond our control.
Yes. If Ripley assumes she did something wrong, if she was too chaotic, too forward, or simply not sophisticated enough, then she maintains a twisted sense of agency.
It implies that if she just acts differently next time, she can prevent future abandonment.
She internalizes Banks's departure as confirmation of her deepest insecurity.
That the authentic, messy version of herself is inherently unlovable and fundamentally easy to walk away from.
That is a devastating but incredibly common cognitive distortion, and it perfectly primes the emotional battlefield for their inevitable reunion.
Let's shift our focus to how the narrative forces these two highly guarded people back into each other's orbit.
Fast forward a month.
We're now in the town of Darling Springs. The Hollywood production is descending on Ripley's lavender farm.
And her sister, Haven, informs Ripley that due to an escalating threat from aggressive paparazzi,
Specifically, a notorious freelance photographer named Ian Joseph.
the studio has mandated elite security for both sisters.
Because they are identical twins, the paparazzi cannot easily distinguish between the star and the farmer, placing Ripley right in the crosshairs.
Ripley is adamantly opposed to this, and then she is introduced to the man the studio hired to shadow her.
The revelation that her assigned protection officer is the man who ghosted her in San Francisco is a masterstroke of narrative engineering.
It really is. It forces an immediate volatile collision between Ripley's unresolved feelings of rejection and Banks's rigid professional boundaries.
It is the ultimate ironic punishment for both of them. Ripley is a woman whose entire identity is built around her competence and independence.
She runs a farm.
She drives a purple electric truck named Juniper. She manages complex agricultural logistics. She fundamentally resents the implication that she requires a hulking, brooding, former Marine to navigate her own hometown.
And Banks, who thrives on predictability and control, is now tasked with protecting a woman who actively despises his presence and knows exactly how to push his buttons.
This setup allows the author to engage in a fascinating subversion of the standard bodyguard trope.
Historically, in romance and thriller narratives, the introduction of a bodyguard forces the protagonist to conform to a strict, militaristic set of rules.
The bodyguard is typically presented as an immovable, stoic object who imposes their will upon the protectee's environment.
The conflict usually stems from the protectee chafing against these restrictions until they inevitably realize the bodyguard knows best.
But this narrative flips that power dynamic entirely.
Yes, by leveraging the specific geography of the small town and Ripley's sheer, obstinate willpower.
Ripley refuses to yield her territory. She initiates this hilarious high-stakes game of cat and mouse.
Tell us about the bike chase.
To assert her independence, she attempts to lose Banks by hopping on her electric beach cruiser and speeding off to make a lavender delivery to a local vendor, Salma.
She is pedaling furiously, looking over her shoulder, feeling this triumphant thrill of having outmaneuvered the elite security expert.
But the author refuses to let Banks be a static character. The very next day, Banks completely neutralizes her rebellion.
How does he do it? Not by forcing her into a bulletproof SUV.
No, by showing up on a mint green beach cruiser of his own, wearing a black helmet, and casually pedaling right alongside her.
That moment is crucial for understanding Banks's methodology. He does not attempt to dominate Ripley's environment. He adapts to it.
In the field of close protection, the goal is often to maintain a low profile and blend into the principal's daily life,
Minimizing disruption while maximizing proximity. By purchasing the beach cruiser, Banks demonstrates a high degree of situational awareness and emotional intelligence.
He recognizes that attempting to restrict Ripley's movements through force or intimidation will only escalate her resistance.
And compromise his ability to protect her. He chooses to participate in her world rather than demanding she submit to his.
It is a highly evolved, non-combative assertion of his presence that leaves Ripley completely disarmed.
And she hates how disarming it is.
She does. She continuously tries to find the edge of his patience, which leads to one of the most culturally significant scenes in the text, the advanced yoga class.
Ripley decides she's going to subject this heavily tattooed, highly disciplined, former military man to the ultimate humiliation.
She abruptly darts into an advanced yoga studio in town, assuming Banks will be too embarrassed or physically rigid to follow her.
Forcing him to wait in the lobby like a chastised dog.
But the narrative completely pulls the rug out from under her.
It does. Ripley throws down her mat, expecting to witness his discomfort. Instead, Banks calmly enters, removes his shoes, and flawlessly executes highly advanced, complex asanas.
He is completely in his element, while Ripley, who has never practiced yoga and was merely using it as an evasion tactic, is left struggling entirely out of her depth.
It is brilliant physical comedy.
But let's look deeper at what this scene communicates to the reader. To me, this is a profound commentary on the evolution of the romantic hero and the dismantling of toxic masculinity within the genre.
Absolutely.
10 or 15 years ago, a male protagonist in this archetype would have grumbled, crossed his arms, and stubbornly refused to participate, viewing the activity as an affront to his rugged masculinity.
But Banks is so secure in his own identity and so committed to his physical and mental maintenance that he embraces the practice without a hint of irony or shame.
You have identified a significant shift in the cultural zeitgeist that is heavily reflected in modern romance literature.
The concept of the alpha male has been radically redefined. The appeal of Banks's character is not rooted in dominance or aggression.
It's rooted in an unshakable internal security.
He later explains to Ripley that he utilizes yoga specifically to maintain his focus, regulate his nervous system, and improve his nonverbal communication skills.
He views it as a necessary tool for a high-stakes professional.
Furthermore, he doesn't use his proficiency to mock Ripley's struggle in the class. He actually praises her audacity for charging into an advanced session simply to prove a point.
He respects her tenacity, even when it is directed against him.
That deep respect is what makes his character so compelling. And the author doubles down on this subversion of expectations in another fantastic sequence. The pedicure scene.
Oh, I love this part. Ripley needs to visit the local nail salon run by a town resident named Maggie.
Again, she anticipates that this hyper-masculine security detail will balk at the hyper-feminine environment of a small-town beauty salon.
She expects him to stand guard outside, looking severe and intimidating.
Instead, Banks seamlessly integrates himself into the space. He sits down in the massage chair adjacent to hers, rolls up his pant legs, and calmly allows the nail technician, Sarah, to buff his feet.
This scene operates on multiple psychological levels. First, it completely neutralizes Ripley's primary weapon.
Her anger.
Yes. Ripley has been utilizing these scenarios, the bicycle chase, the yoga class, the nail salon as a form of asymmetric warfare.
She's trying to locate his breaking point. She wants him to exhibit frustration, anger, or embarrassment. Because if she can make him lose control, she regains the upper hand.
It is a classic trauma response. Pushing someone away by being difficult to see if they will abandon you like everyone else did.
Exactly. It's a test. She is essentially saying, let's see how much of my chaos you can tolerate before you decide I'm not worth the effort, just like you did in San Francisco.
Precisely. And Banks's response is a masterclass in emotional judo. By offering absolutely no resistance, he gives her anger nothing to push against.
When you try to push a wall and the wall suddenly turns into an open door, you lose your balance.
While sitting in the pedicure chair, Banks completely demystifies his presence. He engages in casual conversation. He reveals a tender piece of his backstory.
Mentioning that his younger sister, Emily, used to drag him to nail salons when she was younger.
He humanizes himself in a space where Ripley expected him to remain an aloof, intimidating caricature.
And there's this incredibly electric moment of dialogue during the pedicure. Ripley's trying to interrogate him, trying to figure out his background.
She asks if he is a city guy, trying to box him into a recognizable category.
Banks gently deflects the specifics of his past, but he leans in, completely relaxed, and tells her, "You're my first," in this low, gravelly voice.
He is referring to the pedicure, but the double entendre, delivered in that setting, completely short-circuits Ripley's defensive mechanisms.
It forces Ripley to confront a highly uncomfortable truth. Her adversarial posture is failing because Banks refuses to be her adversary.
And without the shield of her anger, she is left entirely exposed to the reality of her profound physical and emotional attraction to him.
He is demonstrating that he can protect her without suffocating her, and that he can occupy her world without demanding she alter it to accommodate his ego.
For a woman whose entire life is defined by managing the needs and expectations of others, the presence of a man who requires nothing from her but simply exists alongside her is intoxicating.
Which provides the perfect thematic bridge into the logistical reality of their situation.
Because of the escalating paparazzi presence and the fact that the main farmhouse is currently overflowing with Ripley's grandmother, her sister Haven, and various film crew personnel, the security protocols dictate that Banks must remain in close proximity to Ripley overnight.
This means Banks has to move into the small guest cottage on Ripley's property.
And in a nod to one of the most beloved and enduring tropes in all of romantic fiction, the cottage features only one bed.
The one-bed trope is a structural staple for a reason. From a narrative perspective, it is a crucible.
It forcefully removes the physical distance that characters have been utilizing to maintain their emotional distance.
When the environment eliminates the option of physical retreat, the characters are compelled to confront the intimacy they have been actively avoiding.
But beyond the logistical tension, the author utilizes the shared space of the cottage to provide a stark, visual representation of their contrasting psychological states.
The environmental contrast is staggering. Ripley steps into the cottage expecting it to reflect a lived-in, comfortable chaos.
Instead, she discovers that Banks has imposed a clinical, almost unnerving level of order onto his side of the room.
There is no extraneous clutter. His bedside table features only a sleek laptop and a Stephen King paperback, perfectly aligned. His belongings are stowed with military precision.
Ripley, conversely, is a hurricane of material possessions. She leaves clothing draped over furniture. Her side of the room is littered with farm merchandise, notebooks, and the detritus in a profoundly busy life.
She openly identifies herself to him as a slob.
We need to analyze this beyond the superficial messy versus neat dynamic. Environmental control is deeply tied to psychological regulation.
Ripley's chaotic physical space is a direct manifestation of her internal cognitive load. She is responsible for the financial survival of the farm, the emotional well-being of her sister, and the logistics of a film shoot.
Her mind is perpetually scattered across a dozen different crises, and her environment reflects that diffusion of energy.
Banks's extreme organization, however, is a classic behavioral manifestation of hypervigilance. He explicitly tells Ripley that he gets wound up when things are disorderly.
For Banks, physical clutter represents unpredictability, and unpredictability represents a threat.
By meticulously controlling his immediate physical environment, he creates a microclimate of safety where he can temporarily downregulate his nervous system.
That makes so much sense. His neatness isn't just a preference, it is a coping mechanism. But I have a question about how that impacts their dynamic.
Sure.
I hear what you're saying about Banks needing to control his environment because of his trauma, But at a certain point, doesn't that extreme need for order run the risk of becoming a form of emotional tyranny over the people around him?
That's a fair concern.
If his need for neatness means Ripley feels like she's walking on eggshells in her own cottage, isn't his coping mechanism inherently restrictive to her freedom?
That is an exceptionally astute observation, and it touches on the fine line between personal boundaries and relational control.
Right.
If Banks demanded that Ripley conform to his standard of organization, if he criticized her clutter or attempted to reorganize her belongings without consent, it would absolutely cross the line into controlling behavior.
But he doesn't do that.
No. The narrative is careful to show that Banks contains his need for order to his own designated space and his own actions. He doesn't police Ripley, he manages himself.
In fact, he utilizes his inclination toward order as a method of service rather than dominance.
Yes. The acts of service are so prevalent, he cleans her kitchen. He volunteers to take her dog, Hudson, for early morning walks so Ripley can catch up on her sleep.
He anticipates her logistical needs regarding the farm and the town before she even articulates them.
And this brings us back to the origami motif, which serves as the ultimate bridge between his need for control and his desire for connection.
During their time in the cottage, Ripley confesses a vulnerable secret.
She never threw away the original origami butterfly Banks folded for her at the hotel bar in San Francisco.
She kept it as a memento of their fractured connection. Upon learning this, Banks takes a piece of paper from his tablet and folds a delicate, complex origami fox.
And leaves it for her on the nightstand.
It is such a quiet, intimate gesture. Why a fox? And why use paper instead of just telling her how he feels?
A fox is often symbolic of observation, cleverness, and adaptability traits they both share. But the medium is the true message.
As we've established, Banks is deeply uncomfortable with verbal vulnerability.
Articulating complex emotional states feels dangerous to him. It is too unpredictable, too prone to misinterpretation or rejection.
Acts of service and artistic creation are highly controlled, nonverbal avenues of communication.
By leaving the origami fox, he is communicating, I hear you, I recognize the value you placed on our initial interaction, and I am leaving a tangible piece of my focus and care in your space.
It is a profound declaration of affection delivered within parameters she can tolerate.
It is his specific love language. But even with these careful nonverbal negotiations, the pressure cooker of their proximity eventually exceeds the structural integrity of his professional armor.
The tension doesn't snap in the shared bed, as one might expect from the trope, but rather in the cab of Ripley's pickup truck.
Yes, the dissolution of Banks's professional boundaries occurs not during a moment of physical weakness, but during a direct ideological confrontation.
They were driving back to the farm after Banks has seamlessly diffused yet another chaotic situation in town, effortlessly anticipating the movements of the paparazzi and the townspeople.
Ripley, exhausted by her own constant vigilance, finally turns to him and demands, "How are you so unflappable?"
She is aggressively probing his armor, demanding to know the secret to his emotional regulation.
Banks, refusing to be the sole subject of interrogation, turns the mirror back on her. He asks, "How are you so on top of everything?"
He dissects her behavioral patterns, pointing out how relentlessly she manages the farm, her sister, and the entire town's expectations.
Ripley defensively claims it is just her job. And Banks counters that he must remain unflappable to do his job, specifically the job of maintaining professional distance from her.
Ripley's response to that is the catalyst. She pushes him one final time, playfully but pointedly stating that she is trying her absolute hardest to make him break.
And that is the exact millisecond Banks' internal calculus shifts. He cuts the engine of the truck, turns to face her, and simply says, "You won." And then he kisses her.
It is an incredibly satisfying release of tension, but the dialogue leading up to it is what makes it meaningful. When he says, "You won," what is he actually conceding?
He is conceding that the energetic cost of maintaining his professional detachment has finally eclipsed his desire for her.
He is admitting defeat in the war against his own humanity.
By saying "you won," he is acknowledging her power over him, surrendering his most prized possession, his control, and actively choosing vulnerability.
Even knowing it fundamentally violates the core tenets of his professional identity. It is a terrifying, exhilarating leap into the unknown.
But as any student of human behavior knows, a single moment of surrender does not permanently rewire decades of psychological conditioning.
Right. Kissing your client in a pickup truck does not magically cure the deep-seated traumas that built the armor in the first place.
To truly understand why they are both so guarded, we need to peel back the layers and examine the foundational wounds that shape them.
Let's start with Ripley's psychological profile. She is the ultimate manifestation of the fixer archetype.
To comprehend Ripley's relentless drive, we must examine the defining tragedy of her adolescence. When Ripley and Haven were only 15 years old, their parents were killed instantly in a horrific car accident on a snowy road.
While their grandmother Leela stepped in to provide a stable home, the psychological impact on Ripley was profound and immediate.
She experienced a phenomenon known as parentification. Even though she and Haven are identical twins of the exact same age, Ripley internalized the tragedy as a mandate to become the primary caretaker.
She assumed the role of the older, responsible sibling.
She took over the burden of driving Haven to auditions when vehicles broke down. She became the emotional anchor during Haven's struggles with depression.
She ultimately assumed control of the family's legacy, the lavender farm, to ensure their economic survival.
The text makes this incredibly explicit. In a conversation with her grandmother Leela, Ripley articulates her core fear, stating, "I just don't think people stick around."
Her parents didn't stick around. Her ex-boyfriend, Eric Patrick, didn't stick around.
She operates under the subconscious assumption that abandonment is the default state of human relationships.
So she attempts to outmaneuver abandonment through sheer utility. If she makes herself indispensable, if she's the only one who can fix the farm machinery, manage the bee colonies, and navigate her sister's career logistics,
Then she secures her value. In her mind, competence is the only reliable insurance against being left behind.
that is a brilliant articulation of her internal logic. And the author utilizes physical characteristics to brilliantly symbolize this psychological burden.
If we examine the somatic storytelling specifically, their tattoos, the contrast is revealing.
Haven, the actress who was shielded by Ripley's efforts, possesses a single, delicate bird tattooed on her shoulder.
Ripley, however, has an entire flock of birds tattooed up the length of her arm.
Oh, that is such a powerful visual metaphor. Ripley carries the entire flock, so Haven only has to carry herself.
Ripley's armor is her relentless, exhausting competence.
I think this is a highly resonant concept for you, the listener, and for many people listening right now. The sociology of the eldest daughter, or the designated caregiver within a family system, is complex.
Society frequently applauds these individuals, labeling them as superwomen or the glue that holds everything together.
But that applause often functions as a trap. When everyone relies on you to be the strong one, where is the space for you to collapse?
Where's a space for you to need help?
Ripley uses her busyness as a shield to prevent anyone from getting close enough to see how deeply terrified and exhausted she truly is.
Precisely. She suffers from the isolation of overfunctioning. Now, let us pivot to Banks, because his psychological architecture is equally complex, though his coping mechanism manifested differently.
He didn't become the fixer, he became the protector.
During a moment of vulnerability in the cottage, Banks shares the genesis of his need for control. He reveals that during his teenage years in a town called Lucky Falls, his family's reality was entirely dismantled.
His father had been living a double life, maintaining a secret second family.
The most devastating aspect of this revelation for Banks is his admission that he possessed a subconscious awareness of the deceit.
He noticed the behavioral anomalies. His father arriving home late, acting covertly regarding his phone.
But as a child, he failed to synthesize those clues into an accusation. When the truth inevitably exploded, destroying his mother's dignity and forcing them to flee their hometown, Banks internalized a profound, irrational sense of guilt.
He confesses this to Ripley with such agonizing regret. He tells her, "I should have done something sooner. I could have stopped it."
He suffers from a form of bystander guilt, genuinely believing that his failure to act on his observations makes him partially culpable for the destruction of his family.
And that specific trauma, what psychologists refer to as betrayal trauma, birthed his entire adult persona.
His hypervigilance, his obsession with securing perimeters, his choice to enter the Marine Corps, and subsequently the close protection industry, these are not merely career choices.
They are a lifelong, compulsive effort to atone for his perceived childhood failure.
He fundamentally believes that if he is vigilant enough, if he scans the environment perfectly, he can intercept disaster before it strikes the people he is tasked with protecting.
He utilizes professional control to manage his existential terror of unpredictable betrayal.
And just as Ripley's burden is mapped on her skin, Banks's need for order is permanently inked on his.
During that same intimate conversation, Ripley gently inquires about the stark, geometric tattoos on his arm.
Banks explains the symbolism. The triangles represent ambition, growth, and the necessity of moving forward.
The squares symbolize the construction of a new, stable foundation.
The hexagons represent the ultimate goal, balance. Ripley traces these geometric lines with her fingers.
It is a moment of profound emotional intimacy because she is physically acknowledging and validating his desperate, lifelong quest for structure in a chaotic world.
This exchange is the crucible of their mutual healing. They both utilize control to mask deep-seated fears of abandonment and betrayal, but they require entirely different interventions to begin the healing process.
Ripley provides Banks with the gift of absolution. When he confesses his misplaced guilt regarding his father, she completely rejects his self-blame.
She looks him in the eye and forcefully tells him that his father's sins belong entirely to his father.
She systematically dismantles his belief that a teenage boy was responsible for policing the morality of a grown man. She relieves him of a burden he has carried for over a decade.
It is incredibly moving, and in return, Banks offers Ripley the one profound comfort she has systematically denied herself.
A sanctuary where she is not required to be in charge.
With Banks, she does not have to manage the agricultural yields, or soothe her sister's anxieties, or anticipate the needs of the community.
He tells her, "You're safe here. I'm good at finding you."
For a woman who has spent her entire life exhausted from standing on the front lines protecting everyone else, having a highly capable man stand in front of her and assume the burden of vigilance is the ultimate emotional relief.
They discover a perfect psychological equilibrium. However, the architecture of narrative structure dictates that once characters achieve this fragile internal balance, an external pressure must be applied to test its structural integrity.
This brings us to the crisis point of the narrative. The catastrophic collision of Banks' professional duties and his personal desires.
The external pressure arrives in the form of Ian Joseph, the sleazy, opportunistic, freelance paparazzo who's been stalking the perimeter of Darling Springs.
Ripley is running mundane errands at the local grocery store. She is standing in aisle 10, picking up pet supplies and lemons.
Banks is standing nearby. They are not engaged in any overt physical affection, but they are existing within each other's gravitational pull.
Banks is looking at her with a level of unguarded adoration that completely betrays his professional detachment.
Ian Joseph, utilizing a long lens, captures this exact moment. He immediately publishes the photograph to a high-traffic gossip website, VIP Vibes, accompanied by a speculative caption.
The caption reads, "Little did I know who was in the produce aisle." And he looks at her like she's the one.
The publication of this photograph detonates Banks's carefully constructed professional reality.
In the close protection industry, perception is often as critical as physical security. The photograph provides visual confirmation of a compromised principal-agent relationship.
The fallout is swift and devastating. Banks' business partner, Dean, discovers the leak and immediately drives to the farm in Darling Springs.
He enters the farmhouse to find Banks and Ripley engaged in domestic, comfortable proximity in the kitchen.
Dean delivers the fatal blow. As a direct consequence of this public breach of protocol, a massive corporate client, Webflix, has terminated their prospective contract with Apex Solutions.
It is the absolute materialization of Banks' deepest fear. The security firm he and Dean built from the ground up, the pristine reputation they sacrificed to cultivate, is crumbling entirely because of his actions.
And Ripley's immediate reaction to this crisis is entirely predictable based on her psychological profile.
The moment she realizes Banks' livelihood is imperiled, the fixer takes over.
She attempts to throw herself on the proverbial grenade. She aggressively advocates for Banks, telling Dean that the romantic entanglement was entirely her doing, that she relentlessly pursued Banks, attempting to absorb the professional collateral damage to save his reputation.
But Ripley's attempt to fix the situation fundamentally misunderstands the nature of Banks' crisis. Her intervention actually exacerbates his internal collapse.
This event triggers the core foundational wound we discussed earlier. Remember his father.
His father was a man who allowed his selfish, covert desires to obliterate the foundation of his family.
In this moment, standing in the kitchen, looking at the disappointed face of his business partner and the loss of a major contract, Banks suffers a catastrophic crisis of identity.
He concludes that his psychological armor has failed, and worse, that beneath that armor, he is functionally identical to the man he despises most.
He believes he has allowed his personal desires to compromise his integrity and destroy the people relying on him.
The self-loathing is palpable. He completely isolates himself, telling Ripley, "This is on me. I'm just like my father."
It is agonizing for the reader because we know this conclusion is objectively false. His father was a serial manipulator who engaged in systematic deceit.
Banks is a man who made a genuine emotional connection and had it exploited by a predatory photographer.
But he is so deeply entrenched in his trauma response that he cannot differentiate between falling in love and committing a moral atrocity.
He executes a complete emotional shutdown and retreats behind the highest, thickest walls of his professional persona.
This sequence represents the psychological dark moment of the narrative. The illusion of control has been violently stripped from both protagonists.
Ripley is forced to confront the reality that she cannot simply fix Banks's internal shame or repair a severed corporate contract through sheer force of will.
And Banks is forced to confront the reality that his hypervigilance could not protect his business from the unpredictable variables of the human heart.
They are both suspended in a state of agonizing vulnerability, completely stripped of their preferred coping mechanisms.
Which sets the stage for the narrative resolution. How do you rebuild a man who believes he is inherently broken? You send him to the source.
The film production in Darling Strings is wrapping up, and we find Banks sitting in a tapas bar in Sausalito, having lunch with his mother and his sister Emily.
He is utterly despondent. He confesses the entire situation to them. He fully anticipates that his mother will confirm his darkest fear, that he has replicated his father's destructive patterns.
But the narrative subverts expectations, once again, by utilizing the mother figure not as a source of judgment, but as the catalyst for psychological liberation.
In many romance narratives, the protagonist must achieve their epiphany in isolation. Here, the author acknowledges the power of the family system in resolving generational trauma.
Banks's mother, a physical therapist who successfully rebuilt her life post-divorce, listens to his confession. And then she delivers an extraordinarily powerful piece of maternal tough love.
She refuses to allow him to utilize his father's ghost as a shield against his own happiness.
She tells him, "You think you don't deserve nice things because you've held on to this belief that you have to protect me? But you couldn't. He did what he did, and he was the only one to blame."
It is a phenomenal moment of clarity. She explicitly untangles his actions from his father's actions. She systematically dismantles the architecture of his guilt.
And then she cuts to the absolute core of the conflict. She asks him a single defining question.
Is she worth losing a client over?
And Banks's response is immediate and unequivocal. He says, yes, she is.
That simple affirmation represents the climax of his character arc. He achieves a profound cognitive shift.
He realizes that relinquishing his rigid control and letting go of the past does not equate to chaos or moral failure. It is the necessary prerequisite for stepping into his future.
He recognizes that his pursuit of professional perfectionism was a trauma-induced trap. He made a tactical professional error, yes, but he did not commit a moral crime.
He allowed himself to experience love. He finally understands that the cost of maintaining his emotional fortress is infinitely higher than the cost of vulnerability.
And with that realization, we head into the grand finale, the wrap party.
The Hollywood production has officially concluded, and the cast and crew are celebrating at a local venue in Darling Springs.
The author utilizes this setting to tie up the narrative threads of the supporting cast. We learn that Haven is happily and secretly dating William, the local bookstore owner, providing a satisfying resolution to her arc.
Ripley is in attendance, dressed in a simple, stunning lavender sheath dress that perfectly mirrors her connection to her farm and her authentic self.
She is standing outside, looking at the stars, quietly mourning the loss of the connection she thought was broken forever.
And then Banks arrives. But it is crucial to analyze the precise mechanics of his return.
He does not dramatically rush up to her and demand her attention.
He approaches Marcus, the backup security professional currently on duty, and formally relieves him of his post. He explicitly officially terminates his professional obligation to the site.
Only after he has completely divested himself of the role of the close protection officer does he approach Ripley.
He takes her hand not as her employee, but as an equal. A man stepping fully out of his armor and into a space of complete emotional availability.
It is a beautiful synthesis of his need for order and his new capacity for vulnerability. They arrange a midnight picnic in the lavender fields, echoing a cherished childhood memory Ripley shared with her sister.
The narrative achieves perfect thematic symmetry. Banks looks at Ripley and reflects on the trajectory of their relationship.
He acknowledges that, on paper, breaking his cardinal professional rule and risking his burgeoning business for a client was a catastrophically bad idea.
But he achieves the ultimate realization. Some bad ideas, when pursued with authenticity and love, turn out to be the most profound, life-altering decisions a person can make.
He fundamentally ceases his futile attempt to control the uncontrollable variables of life and fully surrenders to the terrifying, magnificent experience of loving someone without guarantees.
It is a structurally flawless and emotionally resonant thematic resolution. If we were to synthesize the core takeaways from this extensive deep dive, it is clear that the source material elevates the standard romance tropes.
The mistaken identity at the hotel bar, the comedic friction of the grumpy sunshine dynamic in the small town, the pressurized environment of the one-bed scenario.
These are not merely deployed for superficial entertainment. The author expertly utilizes these familiar narrative structures as precise psychological instruments,
They allow us to explore how humans process grief, how we construct elaborate defensive armor out of compulsive neatness or relentless overfunctioning.
and how our disparate clinging to the illusion of control ultimately isolates us from the deep, authentic connections we fundamentally require to thrive.
It is an incredibly layered and thought-provoking exploration of the human condition, disguised as a highly entertaining small-town romance. Thank you to you, our listener, for joining us on this rigorous analytical journey today.
We hope this deep dive has illuminated the incredible depth and psychological complexity that can be found within the pages of this genre when you apply a critical and curious eye.
To conclude our discussion today, we want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to examine in your own life.
We've spent the last hour analyzing how Banks utilized his military training, his hypervigilance, and his need for environmental order to construct an impenetrable fortress around his emotional core.
And we examined how Ripley utilized her relentless competence, her status as the familial fixer, and her constant state of busyness to achieve the exact same isolation.
It prompts a challenging personal inquiry. In your own life, what are the supposedly positive characteristics or noble behaviors you rely upon? Perhaps being the one who never complains, being the hardest worker in the room, or being the caregiver who never requires assistance. That might actually be functioning as your own secret armor, subtly preventing you from ever truly letting another human being see you and love you in your most vulnerable state.
That is a profound question that will undoubtedly stick with me and hopefully with you long after this deep dive concludes. Thank you for thinking deeply with us today. We will catch you next time.